an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Wizard's Dilemma, Friday afternoon and dawn. In these chapters, well, we won, kind of, temporarily, postponed, more to the point. And these are some really devastating chapters, which I'm beginning to realize is Diane Duane's specialty. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Devin for commissioning this finale episode. Thank you, Devin. I was saying before I started recording that I had forgotten that I didn't finish this book. It's just been such a long time since the last bit of coverage. And actually, let me check just out of curiosity. Yeah, the last episode was in August. That's what I was going to guess. August 12th. So, yeah, it's been a while. And we just had the one chapter left. There's no more of this series commissioned at all. So for now, this is where we're leaving it. And if much more time passes, then I'll have to retire the series. But, you know, even if we don't do any more of these books, I am really satisfied with this ending for this coverage. Like, this feels like a really adult moment in the series, and there's just something about it that I think is an excellent like period at the end of that sentence, were we to leave it where it is. So Devin says, money's been tight and I'm currently jobless. Oh, I know, buddy. I'm sorry about that. And I really appreciate you pulling this one out. Yeah, you know, I totally get it if people aren't able to commission more. Like, that shit happens. It's no problem. I just wanted to let everybody know where we stand with it, because sometimes people will just sort of assume someone else is taking care of it, and then they're surprised when a series is canceled. And, you know, I figure I try to give you guys a heads up when that happens. But yeah, so, all right, Friday afternoon, the end of the last chapter is basically Nita arriving in her mother's body, for lack of a better word, and seeing all of the damage that has been wreaked by the cancer. And it's really, I feel like I didn't get to dwell on this as much last time, because I had probably been running out of the time by the end of the episode. I tend to do that. But I really love how Diane Duane has chosen to reflect the damage. What she did was basically have it be like, there was a horrible, like, hurricane. Do you guys remember Hurricane Sandy hitting New York, and how, like, there were entire subway tunnels underwater, stuff like that? That's sort of what I was thinking of here. Was she could have written this in a number of ways. And the whole choice in having it look like New York City is meant to really reflect Nita's capacity for understanding, right? It's like the wizardry is showing her what's going on with her mother in a way that she can comprehend. And this, for the wizardry, seems to be what it thinks will be easiest for Nita to really grasp. So it has shown her in her practices, New York City, in various like versions and whatnot, giving her practice runs. And this one, she shows up. All the others have been like, you know, had different sort of strange things about them. But this is the first one that has undergone this kind of damage. And it's interesting because if somebody had asked me how I would have portrayed something like cancer in this sense, I might have said like a bomb went off, you know, like there had been some sort of like attack, or maybe just like things had fallen apart as if they were like neglected. But when you think about that, a bomb is a high impact, sudden catastrophe. Neglect is caused, or the effects of neglect are caused by somebody not doing what they should be to do upkeep on something. Neither of those applies when it comes to cancer necessarily. I mean, mostly no. So treating it like it's a major storm, like a hurricane that came in probably over the course of some time, you saw it coming and it began to sweep through, dumped a bunch of water and ruined things, and then left things to rot and decay. That feels really right. You know, cancer is something that ramps up. It doesn't just appear out of nowhere like a bomb. Like if you were doing that, I would think of something like a bone breaking or major trauma, being hit by a car. This is something that is not so much of an external thing. A hurricane is part of an ecosystem. It's part of the way the planet functions, right? They are a naturally occurring catastrophe. And that is kind of how cancer also is. Like our bodies like create it, you know, which is horrifying. And I just really think that I didn't quite grasp, because I re-listened to the end of the previous chapter before I went and listened to the rest, just to kind of refresh myself. And I don't think that I really adequately like appreciated how excellent a metaphor that is. You know, I really like that. Christine says, cancer sucks. I'm now specializing in oncology nursing, and this description is eerily accurate. Yeah, that's got to be rough. Power to you, Christine. So she's in the midst of that and trying to like find her way to the kernel, as she keeps calling it, which is basically the core of who her mother is, right? That's like what she has searched for in all of her test runs. And she's not able to zero in on it as quickly as she had been. And it's kind of freaking her out, actually. And she sort of bites, is it Priya? I'm trying to remember the name of the poor little possessed otter. She bites his head off when he's sort of like, are you sure you have time for this? And it's just not really necessary for her to have been so like aggressive about it, but at the same time, what does he want from her? She's doing her best, you know? So I kind of understood her feeling in that moment. And then we go to Friday afternoon, which is Kit. And he's talking to Paunch and saying, I thought you said you were going to be able to find her. And Paunch says, I should have been able to, but the scents changed again. What? Kit was confused and stood still in the utter darkness where they had been walking. How? The one who doesn't want us to find Nita has changed it. The world she's gone to is twisted out of orientation with the usual ones. And this ties in with what we find out later, which is basically that Nita's whole name has kind of changed because of the fact that she was about to throw in with the lone power. The choice that she made to pay the price that he was asking fundamentally changed something about who she is. And what we wind up sort of grappling with as these chapters unfold is, what does it mean when you have made a bad choice like that and you have gone the wrong way? And you realize that you have, and you want to take it back, but the damage is kind of done. Can you take it back? Is that even an option? Like, you know, and what we find out is it has to be. It has to be an option. You can't pretend it never happened. You can't simply undo it. But you have to move forward with the acknowledgement that you made that bad choice. That has to be part of the way it all works. So yeah, that makes sense that her scent would change, because that's sort of like Paunch is like trying to basically spiritually sniff her out, and her name is tied to who she is spiritually. So it would totally make sense that all of those things changed at the same time. So Pralaya is the name of the otter. There we go. Nita and Pralaya kept making their way along through the dark waters southward along Fifth Avenue. Nita had only a hunch to go on now, only the faintest sense of where her mother's kernel lay. Pralaya paused with her at the corner of 5th and 40th, putting his head up out of the water and peering around him, while all around the two of them, viruses darted and poked at their defense shields like angry little bees. The darkness around them became more oppressive, an inward-leaning, watching, sullen nest of shadows. Nita could feel how the place was full of death and the anticipation of death, and wanted them out of there. And she thinks, but if Pralaya is the lone one, why is it finding this so scary and upsetting? And we find out later that that presence is likely her mother. Because, and wanted them out of there, I'm guessing, is maybe the fact that her mother doesn't think that Nita should be fucking with this. But I'm not positive about that interpretation because this never gets explicitly explained. So Pralaya is saying, this is a terrible place. I wonder that you can bear it here. And she's like, yeah, well, I'm not exactly here for fun. So, she was tired and very scared, both for herself and for her mother, and she simply wished that all this was over. The thought came to her, you are now so tired you will make some terrible mistake. And she was too tired even to care about that. So, this is when Kit gets sort of lured into a false world. They stepped out into Kit's backyard, except that the place had the feel of the universes that Kit and Ponch had been creating when Ponch first started taking Kit along on his walks. Kit looked around him in surprise at an utterly perfect summer day. Everything he could have wanted was there. The knowledge that school was out for the summer, the sound of Carmela's stereo blasting upstairs, his mother laughing with loving scorn at something his father was doing in the kitchen. The sky was flawlessly blue, the air just hot enough to make one think about going to the beach, but not having to do anything. The locusts were beginning to say zzz in the trees, and just over there, the sudden whoomp of air as Nita appeared out of nothing, turned toward him, grinning with excitement, her manual in her hand. "Stop it right there," Kit said to the world. The image froze. And he realizes that this is basically like his heart's desire, a perfect moment. And that he could stay here, he could live here. I could even use this power to make myself believe that was where I'd always lived, the way things had always been. I could make time hard. Another one. And if he could make that, then he could make anything. Anything. Maybe this was how it had all started. The manual was sketchy on the first 100th of a second, Tom had said. Privacy issues. Was it possibly something as simple as this? That in some other region of space-time, some other being, no more or less powerful than Kit, had stumbled across a spark such as the one he held now and had created? Here he was. Here was the power. All Kit had to do was use it and get everything right this time. Everything. A whole universe of universes, innumerable, unfolding themselves as he watched. The essence of creation running riot, running rampant, life exploding through it. And then he had to laugh. He started to laugh so hard he could hardly stand it. His sides started to hurt. Oh, yeah, he thought. Nice try. Give me a break. When he was able to breathe again, Kit straightened up and gazed around him. No matter how he created such a perfect place, or had this one been left for him to find, No matter that he might be able to delude himself into believing that it was reality, the truth was that it wouldn't be. Elsewhere, the real world would go on, people would hurt, life would be alternately happy and miserable. In the real places where wizards were needed to fight the fight, even if they might never see it won. This isn't real enough for me, Kit thought. I want the kind of reality that surprises me. And anyway, wizardry isn't for getting out of reality, out of the world. It's for getting further into it. So he busts out of there, and I just really like that as a moment of like trying to sort of lure him into a place where everything is okay. You know, it makes me think of what like my moment would be of real, like that sort of temptation. And, I really like, there are so many things that come to mind, and I really don't know what it would be. I feel like what I immediately think of is like a particular situation that isn't really, like, he's thinking of the circumstances of his actual life and what that would look like if it were everything that he already has, but a perfect version of it. And I really don't know for myself what it would be, because every time that I sort of think of like a temptation, I want to add things in that I don't already have. You know, I want to make it like, oh, well, there'd be a fireplace crackling. I don't have a fireplace. I mean, I have a fake one, but you know, I would want to be like, well, it was snowing outside. It doesn't snow here. Things that really, that wouldn't be an option in a reality here. Would it be that I could just have that if I got to choose the reality? Maybe. I don't know. But it's a very tempting one. I like it. So Nita could feel the Colonel more clearly now. It wasn't too far away. But somehow this wasn't making her feel any better. The darkness, that watching presence hidden in it, and the little swarming, biting viruses were all beginning to wear her down. So she's thinking about the oath. I will guard growth and ease pain. But does there come a time when you stop growing? And when you and the universe agree that you're going to stop? I will ever put aside fear for courage and death for life when it is right to do so. Was there the slightest possibility here and now that it wasn't right? How could you tell without being one of the powers? And if people can't tell, then the game just isn't fair. That's a good line. You know, if you're being kept from the tools that would alert you to what the choice really should be. But the thing is, that's telling yourself a story that isn't really true. You know. There are a rare few cases in life where you don't really know what the right thing to do is. Most of the time, we know the right thing. It just happens to also be the incredibly difficult, inconvenient, like life-shattering sort of thing. Something that will blow up the whole way that you live. You know, in my case, I knew that I should leave Brendan before I did. And I didn't want to do that. So I kept telling myself that I wasn't really sure what the right thing to do was, how to handle this. Yes, I did. I did know. But it was going to be really hard. I don't want to. Guess what? You still wind up having to do the hard part. You just delay it and make it worse if you don't just do the right thing out of the gate. That's the thing. I think that we try and avoid pain so much. And we think that that's something that you actually have the option to do. That's really the main story we tell ourselves, is that there's a way to avoid pain in life. And you just, no, there's so not. Like, that's the whole point. There's no way to avoid pain and also be alive and live your life. That's just not going to happen. So you get to choose how bad that pain is in some ways, sometimes. And often we choose to avoid and delay, which actually winds up making it so much worse. You know, if I had managed to have the strength and power, the willpower to do the right thing, he and I might actually be able to be friends. I might not have completely lost that relationship. But I didn't do the right thing. I put it off and rationalized, and then I ruined everything. And we don't speak at all. And that was kind of my choice in a way. I didn't know that's what I was choosing, but I think I had an idea. I think I kind of knew that's what I was choosing. And sometimes our immediate comfort feels more important than what our future. That's part of the reason why we make so many bad decisions, is we are much more willing to deal with a distant sadness than a present sadness. This whole thing it's so hard because I understand Nita's position. I really get it. But the issues that I had brought up at the beginning of the book all sort of come to a head here. So Nita realizes that the Colonel is in the Empire State Building. It struck her as a poor place to hide anything. But then its purpose isn't to keep the Colonel hidden. It's to let me find it and use it and fail so that I'll agree to the bargain. And she doesn't realize, as far as the power is concerned, she's already agreed to it. We saw her agree to it. We didn't, she didn't say the words, but she kind of said them. It happened. So Paunch is pissed. It fooled us that time. And Kit says, it's not your fault. It was after me. I should have expected it, but now we know something, says Paunch. What? That you have something that can stop it. I'm telling the darkness to take us to where we'll learn best what to do to find Nita to help her. And, how much longer they spent in darkness, he wasn't sure. Kit could feel Paunch in a terrible sense of urgency, of the darkness resisting, pushing against him, trying to slow him down, but Paunch wasn't letting it stop him. He was pushing back, fierce and unrelenting. They broke out into the light. Paunch surged forward. It was a beach. He was standing at the water's edge and turning. He could see Jones Inlet behind him. Is this another one of its tricks? Another place where I'm supposed to get distracted by what could have been? But somehow he knew it wasn't so. Though this was Jones Inlet, it was also something else. It was the sea. The sea. The sea! Our blood's like that sea, Kit thought. The same salinity, the same... You're right. You're right. Come on, we've got to find her before she starts. And when I realized what this was, I was like, oh, that is good. That is a really tidy to sort of use the same, methodology. I love it. This is so gratifying. So then we go back to Nita. And Perlaya is saying, those things don't really bite me, but they still make me itch. And Nita says, let's go in. They went through the doors at the top of the steps and found themselves in a vast gray hall full of shadows. Right, Nita said. She glanced once at her charm bracelet, made sure the spells on it were active, and began to walk through the place, listening. So she finally finds the spot and has to reach into the water that is freezing cold and pulls it up, and it's an apple. It dripped black water, and as that water fell into the pool's surface came alive with more of the ugly little hexagonal virus shapes that had swarmed around her and Perlaya outside. These, though, were bigger and somehow nastier. They had no eyes, but they were nonetheless looking at her and seeing prey, the kind they already knew the taste of, which I was like, that's not necessary. Why'd you have to say that? Bleh. I hate it. So, she finally speaks to them. I'd like you to stop doing what you're doing to my mother. And they say, no, we have a right to live. We are her. We are of her. We live in her. She gave us birth. We have a right to do what we were created to do. You are also of her. What we do to her, we can do to you given time. Nita didn't like the sound of that. Same. Agree to stop doing what you're doing, or I must abolish you. It was the formal phrasing of a wizard who, however reluctantly, discovers that he or she must kill. So they continually say no, and she says one last chance, and then finally, she took a deep breath, flicked the charm bracelet around to bring the power feed configuration she'd designed into place, then brought it together with the colonel. I'm sorry, she said, and pushed the power in. And nothing happened. Nita stared at the colonel, horrified. She tried feeding the power necessary into the colonel again, twisted that particular strand of power until it bit into her fingers, but that spell is now invalid, said a dark voice behind her. It uses a version of your name that is no longer operational. Your name has changed. You have changed. When you were looking at your mother in the hospital last night, you made up your mind to pay my price, and therefore the spell cannot work. And she realizes, because I agreed, I'm going to lose my wizardry and my mom will die. And she just is like, she knows that the lone power tends to just lie. But in this case, it's telling the truth. She can tell. Standing there with the colonel, realizing once and for all that she'd done everything she could and there was nothing else she knew that would make the slightest difference, Nita's world simply started to come undone. She could do nothing to stop the tears of fear and grief and frustration that began to run down her face. So she says Pralaya, and Pralaya says this is beyond my competence. And she turns around and says, just what I thought. So much for any help from you. He looked shocked. But that would hardly be the Lone One's preferred method. No way it's going to give me any help at all if it can be avoided. Pralaya looked more stunned than before, if possible. What are you talking about? You don't know what's living inside you, Nita said. Well, I bet you're about to find out. Come on, she said to the one she knew was listening. This is the moment you've been waiting for, isn't it? Not with any possible doubt of the outcome, said a huge, dark, satisfied voice. The lone power was standing there looking at her, and for just the briefest second, Pralaya coexisted with its newly chosen form. It looked human, like a young man, though an inhumanly handsome one, and shadows wrapped around it like an overcoat. Shadows that reached out and now wrapped themselves around Pralaya, dragged him struggling and horrified into themselves, and hid him away. Now you really shouldn't have said that, said the young man. While he didn't actually know what was happening, I could have let him live, but you had to come right out and tell him, at which point his usefulness to me vanished. Nita stood there, horrified. You just killed him. No, the lone one said. You did. Not a bad start, but then you were intent enough on killing something. Anyway, don't be too concerned about Pralaya. I'll find another of his people to replace him if there's need. Now, though, matters stand as I told you they stood. All we need is your conscious answer to the question. Can we do business? Poor Pralaya. That was a devastating moment. It really was. I really wish I knew more about, what landed Pralaya in the position to be, specifically, to be in the, thrall, I guess is a word for it, of the lone one, where the lone one can just be in there and come forward whenever. But it really feels like he was not given a fair shot. I feel like that's really, I wanted Pralaya to be able to come out of that, for that to be able to be undone somehow. So at this point, here comes Kit. Fairest and fallen one more time, greeting and defiance. And the lone one here says, oh, you, trying to run her life yet again. And what he does is runs this game where he leans into what makes Nita the most self-conscious about herself. basically what he says is, you'll do anything to try and run her life for her. You couldn't stand the idea that she might pull something off without your help. And this whole thing, you know, it's all preying on the fact that she felt so terrible about what happened with the Jones Inlet, and that she, you know, thought that she was like on the right side of things, and then it turned out that she had it all wrong. And she realizes later that was the lone one kind of setting her up. It like caused her to fail, and then sowed all these doubts about how Kit saw her, her own competence, everything about what she did as a wizard was called into question, priming her for this moment of believing that she had to prove herself in a way that nobody cares about. Nobody needed it except for her. But she felt like she was about to make a big statement by doing this on her own. And, oof, it's really awful, guys. Like, knowing that she was so... That this is such an understandable reaction that she was having, that this is something I think we've all sort of fallen for at one time or another in our lives, failing something, and that causing us to like dig in even harder on doing something foolish because we're still sore and upset about the fact that we failed this other thing. And Kit says, I wouldn't bet that Neitz is just going to dump me. I would, the lone one said. I hold the only betting token that matters at all in the present situation. Only with my help can she save her mother's life. It's not true, Neitz, Kit shouted. It tried pretty hard to keep Ponch me from getting here. It must have a reason. I can do without further interference, said the lone one. That's reason enough. Now, though, if I thought you might possibly accept a different version of the same bargain... Suppose Nita here keeps her wizardry, even despite the mistake she's just made. I even save her mother in the bargain. Kit shook his head and Ponch growled again. I serve life, and the powers that be that cast you out, and the one, the power beyond them, and so does Neitz whatever you've done to her, so just get used to it. The brief silence that followed was terrible. I've been used to it. For too long, said the lone power. Here and there I stop mortals from incessantly reminding me. The shadow wrapped around it, already huge, grew longer and darker, and inside it moved things that Nita emphatically did not want to see. It had been a long time since her bedroom shadows had been full of their little legs and their blind front ends and their fangs, the little jaws that moved. Kit, though, laughed. Been there, seen them. Millipedes? Is that all you've got? What a yawn. His tone was astonishing. It banished the shadows all by itself. Nita remembered how she had dreaded those things when she was little, and now found herself thinking to her amazement, can someone else really just show you how to kill the fears? Is it that easy? I thought they always said you had to do it yourself. But maybe there was more to it than that. Maybe other strengths weren't their own property, if they offered. Y'all, there was a post Rashawn made a little while ago that she shared from some other source that said, extreme independence is a trauma response. And it's a huge simplification, of course. But this moment of her realizing that maybe accepting help is how it's supposed to work is truly something that I think all of us could stand to fucking learn. So many of us subscribe to this bullshit ideology that frankly is fueled by capitalism in a lot of ways, and this weird like lonely island, not that lonely island, but like that idea that every man is an island, that we all have to do for ourselves, that you need to be completely apart from any sort of dependence on another person, or else you're failing somehow. And if you're not failing now, it will lead to your failure. And oh my God, I can't tell y'all how much I believed that. And how many of my friends whom I know better, really, still believe that. And it's such a shame. It really is that we have made it that accepting help from people is an admission of failure. And we live in a world that is patently unjust. The whole way the world works is skewed and does not feed everybody in it equally. And I mean that in every sense, literally, figuratively, however you want to interpret that. The idea that we should be born into a world like this and then just manage all alone without support. Why do we think that's the way it should be? Human beings are just an inherently social animal, first of all. Second of all, everything about humanity has been predicated on trying to create a society. And a society functions, a civilization functions, due to interlocking parts that depend on one another. And we all want that to be the case, and yet we want to deny that reality for ourselves. We want to pretend as if that isn't also, if we have that functioning society, something that we would need to depend on. And it's one of those I have had a really difficult time in my life figuring out how to parse the difference between accepting help that's offered and relying on that help as a means of proving whether or not somebody cares about me, because that's sort of become a measure for me. I had parents that I didn't feel I could rely on growing up. And so part of the way that I test relationships is I will draw someone in a little too much sometimes and see if and how they push back. And it's a means of pushing people away in some ways, trying to deny the fact that I need the help by making it so that somebody sort of forces on me that they aren't going to help. And then I go, well, fine, I don't need it anyway. I don't need your help. I didn't need it. I was just doing that to see if you would do it because I know that you don't really care about me enough to really be there. It's a weird, I had a back and forth sort of thing with accepting help. And there was a part of me at times that accepted help, but with a deep resentment that I was in a position, despite everything I did, to need it. And I would fling that resentment onto the person offering the help, which is also not a super place to be. All of these are not great. And I feel like I'm only just now starting to figure out how to accept help and be at peace with the fact that I needed it and let that be it and not use it as some sort of weird test, not completely push somebody away for offering it. And I mean, there are people out there who offer help as a means of kind of controlling you. And that's also been something that I've been on the alert for. It's a very murky business. And Nita's murk is all based on the fact that she failed something earlier that she was trying to do on her own. She thought she could handle it. And the fact that she couldn't, that she was so deeply wrong, that is making her want all the more to prove that she can now. And it's just sort of hilarious because if you really take the lesson, the real lesson that she should have absorbed from that. Oh God, people in the chat. Christine says, I did not come here for Natasha to call out my self-sabotaging behavior, but here we are. Listen. We all have our things. Devin says, I don't have a problem accepting help. I find it damn near impossible to ask for help. Devin, just move up here, man. We've had this conversation. There's a job waiting for you. Come on. What's down there for you? Tell me a thing. Get out of there. Come on. We did this. I'm not going to say any more now, but Devin, you're on notice. I told you. But yeah, this thing that she should have learned is that listening to Kit, her friend's judgment, she could have been involved and helped with the thing. But instead what she did was she got so angry at the fact that he wouldn't listen to her that she basically slammed the door in his face and wouldn't play anymore. Her determination to do something on her own was part of what led to the fact that they splintered away from each other. And she didn't want to compromise or see what he was trying to say. And that, if she were kind of trying to grow in that direction, what she would see is like, oh my God, I tried this once before to just do it on my own. And it turned out that he had another better way that I refused to see. And I'm not going to make that mistake again. I am going to listen. I'm going to accept his help because he was right. But the lone one is getting into her fucking psyche and is trying to convince her that that failure means that she has to all the more prove herself this time. That basically they're going to think that's who you are forever if you don't fix this. It's just such a backward perversion of the actual lesson. And when you are full of doubts and fear already, that sort of talk makes more sense in the moment than otherwise. So at this moment, she tells Kit to leave. And Kit's like, yeah, fat fucking chance. The lone power laughed. Well, anyone can see where this is going. Unless you throw him out of here yourself, it looks like you're going to let someone else die for you again. I wouldn't have thought you were such a coward. And she like lets it get to her. And I'm just like, girl, oh, he's being so obvious. But like, she's just in the exact right space for the shit to work on her. It's just so annoying. As she did, the greater darkness that had hung about her since she came to this place, that leaning, inward-pressing obscurity, came wrapping down around her, squeezing the breath right out of her, and it spoke. Don't I get something to say about this? That darkness leaned in ever closer around all of them, even the lone one. It was a different kind of darkness than the lone power's enwrapping shadows. Nita stared up into it, confused, frightened, and then realized she had no reason to be. Nita knew this darkness from a long time ago, from the inside. Some memories, she realized, are recovered only under very special circumstances. This dark, immense presence completely surrounding her, owning the world, being the world. Mom? Nita whispered. I do get something to say about this, said that voice. Not just suspected now, but actually heard. Nothing that matters, said the lone power, though it sounded just slightly uncertain. The only thing that matters, said her mother's voice. It's too late, the lone one said. She's made the bargain. She's made nothing, said Nita's mother's voice, because this is my universe, and I say what goes here, and she does not have my permission. This is my body. If this is going to be a battleground, I make the rules. Oh, this is so good, you guys. I was so happy. I was so happy. Y'all know how I felt about the fact that Nita was making all of these plans and not involving her mother in any of the concept of what she was going to have to sacrifice. I was really upset that Nita was thinking she might die or give up her wizardry or something for her mother's life, when that is the opposite of what her mother would want for her. And that even if she saved her mother wouldn't live knowing that her daughter gave up something for her like that, which most mothers, that is not what they want. That is not how they would choose to like continue to live. But Nita didn't consult her. She didn't ask. And it bothered me. And I'm so delighted that her mother makes a showing here and is pretty much like, oh, that's not how that's going to go at all. I am the boss. And granted, she's not as much the boss as we would all like to be of ourselves. She doesn't get to just be like, I guess I don't have cancer anymore. That's not how that works. But she gets to choose more than I ever expected for her involvement in this story. She's not some passive agent that's just like sitting there being saved. She gets straight up involved in this. So her and the Lone Power go back and forth here for a while. And Nita is watching her mother and realizing just how badass her mom is and how much presence she has and how like willing to go to bat she is. And her and Kit are thinking about how brave she is and the fact that bravery, even so, may not be enough when it comes down to it. She may not have anything but guts and intention, Kit said, but that's half of wizardry to start with. And we're carrying. That won't work, the lone one said, laughing. Certainly not for her. And not even for Nita anymore, as you've seen. You think that by plugging an older version of Nita's name into this spell, she'll no longer be mine? It won't work. It takes more power than either of you have to reverse the kind of changes she's been through. She knows me now. She's willing to pay my price to keep her mother alive, and sorry, Mom, but permission or no permission, it's Nita's choice that finally counts. So, Kit basically asks Nita for her power, and the lone one starts mocking her. Oh, of course, give him all your power. So much for doing anything useful by yourself. And she hears all those doubts, and then she just takes the bracelet off and throws it to Kit anyway. She overcomes her own, like, dependence on herself, on this delusion. Really. And Kit caught it and quickly attached the old version of Nita's name he'd saved from the Jones Inlet wizardry. Then he reached into the air beside him and brought something else out. A small, pale spark of light. At first it seemed little, but swiftly it lit up all that place and even chased the shadows briefly away from the lone one's face, a sight that made Nita turn away. For the terror of it, to some extent, she could stand, but the beauty of it, seen together with that ancient deathliness, was difficult to bear. The dragon's eye, Kit said, as he hooked the gleed into an empty link of the charm bracelet, and the whole chain came alive with sudden fire. Something brand new, something you've never touched, something born after the change happened to you, the chance to be otherwise. Something you can't affect. Not true, it cried. All creation, even the void from which things are created anew, has my power at the bottom of it. Not here it doesn't, not in this. Whether you like it or not, even while you're killing people, the world is starting to heal, and so are you. So, at this point, she sees that Kit is attaching this other name. And she hears the pig say, assuming you're into sequential time. And she realizes, if you can't put together what you were with what you are now so you can make up for your mistakes and not make the same ones again, then what's the point? This isn't about reversing anything. It's about going forward. Ah, I love it so much, you guys. I love it. You can't just pretend the things that you did didn't happen, that you didn't make those mistakes, that there weren't consequences, that you didn't hurt people. But you can acknowledge that while incorporating them into who you are in such a way that you won't do it again. That's the whole point. That's everything. That's it, kids. That's it. Guess what? she said, and in the single quick gesture she'd had entirely too much practice with lately, which I honestly thought she was giving him the finger for just a second, she knotted the names tight together with the wizard's knot. The blast of power that went through her was like being hit by lightning. Whether because of her remade name or the presence of the gleed, suddenly Nita could comprehend all those little darknesses in the water much more fully than just by using the kernel. Those stinging, buzzing little horrors were right about being, in their own twisted way, part of her mother, but now she could see exactly what to do about them. The solution was the same as what she had been trying to do with Kit and Sri at Jones Inlet. Except that where she'd been wrong about how to use her part of the wizardry before, here and now she was right. Her wizardly fix for Jones Inlet had been too complicated. This whole contra-replication routine would be great, Kit had said, if the chemicals in the pollution knew how to reproduce themselves. Of course, they hadn't. But viruses were just very smart chemicals in a protein shell that did know how to reproduce themselves, which made the solution perfect for her mother. It set me up, Nita thought in a growing fury. The Lone One made sure I came up against a problem where my solution would fail, and fail painfully. And where I fought with Kit, so that when I came to this moment I'd be too hurt and too scared to try the solution again. Too scared to even see it. She trembled with rage. But to waste time on being angry now would only play into its hands. So, she does the thing. And everything gets cleaned out, or so she thinks for an instant. But once this sort of detonates, for lack of a better word, she can sense that there are pockets here and there that the cleansing power she just used couldn't reach. There are little knots here and there that are still waiting, basically. Little seeds that will sprout eventually. And Nita collapses here and thinks to herself it was all for nothing, while the Lone One is like, if you'd done it my way, there wouldn't be anything left. But her mother, rightfully, begins to talk to her and says, basically, this is how life is supposed to be. You don't get to pick when you die. And if we were to give in to him and let him have his way and eradicate it all, that would come with its own price. This would result in me becoming obsessed with staying alive at the expense of all else and not living, not really feeling the sacredness of being alive, but seeing it as an end in itself. And that would mean it would win. And there's this moment where she grabs the gleed and she says, the light shone in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. This light, but you never learn, do you, or only really slowly. After a second, the lone power turned away. Oh, no, you don't, Nita's mother said, and the lightning blasted out from her and struck it down into the nearest pool. If I am going to go anywhere, first you're going to find out up close and physical what the things you've done to me all this while have felt like. Having fun with that? Doesn't feel so much fun from inside my body, does it? You should have thought of that before you came in here. Just feel all those broken bones and strains, those 6 weeks off for tendinitis, the bruises and infections and herniated muscles and all the rest of it. Oh, we knew about pain all right. Dance's 2 hours worth of childbirth every weekday evening at 8 and a Saturday matinee. And then, how about this? Now that I've got your attention. Nita flinched, for this was the phrase that most often preceded the tongue lashing you got when you hadn't cleaned your room properly, and to a certain extent, she could feel what her mother was imposing on the lone one. Here, the experience inflicted on it was all the more intense for being recent, fresh in the sufferer's mind. The blurred vision, the growing pain, the uncomfortable and unhappy sense that, hey, isn't this supposed to this isn't supposed to be happening. What's the matter with me? The loss of control, of mastery over a body that was always precisely mastered in the old days. Because reminder, she was a ballerina. The slowly growing fury, inexpressible, bottled up, that things weren't working the way they should. In fact, that nothing was working the way it should. And that, I think, is really the thing, is when you have lived in a body and it begins to do other things, you just feel so betrayed and angry. Like, how dare things just decide to do whatever the fuck? I thought we were all on the same fucking team here. It's just really, like, it just makes you so disgusted, you know? And she says, even with your inventions, this life that you hate so much is still too much for you. It was always too much for you. And Nita is watching the lone one as it writhes in the water and pulls itself out, and it's like crumpled on the ground all wet, and she thinks that it's beaten. And her mother finally says, no, that's what you're expecting, isn't it? You want me to win this battle, and after that, when we're all off our guard, comes the betrayal. And she tells Nita, look at him. That's a really good beaten act, isn't it? And basically is like, yeah, he's fucking with us. You think that we've won because that's what he wants you to think. But this isn't the kind of thing that you can win that way. He is offering you the option to, because it's not something that could be possible. You can buy some time. That's the option you've got. Some time. I'm up against my own time limit now, aren't I? Override the body now and we'll all be sorry for it later, if not personally, then in the lives of the people around us. We're supposed to think we're winning. The point being to encourage us to come home in triumph, to distract me at any cost from doing what I know is right. If it can't ruin my life and yours straightforwardly by killing me, it'll try another way. If I survive this, I'll live and get to like it so much that my whole life becomes about not dying. What kind of life is that going to be? And then she says, this part got me, guys. I won't do it, sweetie. Not even for this. Not even because I love you, and I'm afraid to leave your dad, and you, and Darine, and I don't know what's coming afterward for me, and I love my life, and I hate the thought of leaving all of you alone, in pain, and I'm not ready, and I just don't want to go. Not even for that, her mother said. It's not going to happen. I may not be what you are, but this I know. There's a power in what we are as mortal beings that even that one can't match. If we throw it away, we stop being human. I won't do it. And certainly not when doing it plays into the enemy's hands. So as for you, you'll get what you incorrectly consider your piece of me soon enough. But in the meantime, I'm tired of looking at you, so just take yourself straight on out of here before I kick your poor deluded rear end from here to eternity. Ugh. I hate it. You guys, I'm just sitting here trying not to burst into sobs. Every time, practically the end of every book I've cried, almost all of them. Almost all of them. And they wind up back in Kit's backyard. That's how they exit. And I'm out of time, so I'm going to have to sort of hurry up this last bit. But Nita has a bit of a dream that she's in Time Heart with her mother, but it's like a version of Time Heart that is more in line with her mother's concept of how that would be her territory, as she puts it. And there's a lot of discussion of the fact that she came from her mother. She is a part of her mother. And that cycle sort of turns around, and her mother becomes a part of her as well. And that even when her mother dies, she won't actually be gone. And Nita says, I won't be able to talk to you. And her mother's like, I bet you would know what I was going to say anyway, though. Which is really, if you know your parents well enough, likely true. And it turns out like they got the tumor out, and her father is so hopeful. But she knows that's not it. And there's an interesting moment with, there's a couple. Dareen, first of all, thanks them, despite the fact that they didn't completely get it done. She knows that they did their damnedest and at least bought them some time. And she's really very appreciative of that, which is more than I was expecting. I was worried, to be honest. And then they go to the hospital to see her mother, and she asks them to take off for a little bit and leave her and her husband alone. And Nita can sort of hear the conversation despite the fact that she's not in the room, which I think is like a residue of having been inside of her mother that way, and that there's still like this connection there. And she hears her mother say, Harry, cut it out and look at me. We've bought me some time. We have time to say our goodbyes, enough for that at least. Beyond that, it's all a gamble. You don't need to waste any more time worrying about Kit. No? No. What is that? Was that just worrying about that, like, he wasn't a good partner for her daughter? Is that what she means? So she's basically like, oh yeah, he proved his ass. Which I appreciate. That's a nice side effect. I'm not looking forward to when she dies, because I feel like that has to happen within the series, and that's going to be fucking awful. And basically what she tells her husband is just, we are going to live the hell out of our lives before I'm gone. And it's how we should all be approaching life, but it's just so rare to do that, And it feels very impractical at times. So yeah, she has the meeting with her mom in Time Heart and watches her mother leave and walk up a mountain, which is clearly, a metaphor for her mother beginning her journey to leaving this world. And she's not gone. Nita can still see her, but she's started. She's walking away. Ugh. I hate it. Our ways are going to part one way or another. Parents and kids do it all the time, and they both grow up. You're just going to have to do it faster than we planned. Since there's no way out of it, let's enjoy every day. Heaven only knows what may happen afterward, but they can't take away from us what we make one day at a time, just all of us together. That we keep. And anything else, we'll find out soon enough. This is rough, guys. What happens now, Nita said. And here's the transcendent pig. What usually does? Life, for a while. Then the usual brief defeat. But victory's certain. Never think otherwise. There is loss, and there is pain. And in your home frame of reference, they're real enough, not to be devalued. But today the energy's running out of things just a little more slowly. For those who trust their hearts as a measure. The light on the bedroom ceiling woke Nita, glinting through her window from a car pulling into the driveway below. Nita sat up in bed, wiped her face, and tried on a smile. To her astonishment, it didn't feel like such a terrible fit. She got up, threw on jeans and a t-shirt, and went downstairs to tell her mom hello. And that is the end of the book. I can't believe I kept myself from crying, but I managed it. So, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Thank you, Devin and Christine. And I've really been enjoying this series. We'll see if there's another one commissioned, but I understand if not. And, if not, that means that I just get to binge them, which won't be terrible. I won't hate that. So, but yeah, this was a great, great book. I really enjoyed this one. It was really sad, but it was really good. So, all right, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you all again so much. I appreciate you. And hopefully I'll be seeing you again soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.